Over the past 12 months, more than 1,000 fleet managers have attended Peugeot's fleet diesel presentations and seminars around the country. The audiences at these shows were able to judge for themselves the excellent performance and high specification of Peugeot's range of diesel cars. They could also compare them with our competitors' products during the drive appraisal that followed the presentations. What they couldn't do, of course, was pick up the presentation and take it back with them to their own companies, where the petrol versus diesel debate is still raging. So, we're going to show you some key elements of the April 1992 Peugeot Diesel in Action presentation, beginning with the views of a selection of fleet managers.
Hello, my name's David Riley, and this is Mallory Court in the heart of the Warwickshire countryside. We've invited a number of fleet buyers here to tell us about their experience of diesel in action. They're not journalists, not rally drivers, or aficionados looking for esoteric gimmickry, but people whose job it is to buy cars, and buy them by the hundred.
We have a car fleet of about 288 cars. Of those, 80 or so are diesels, and of those 80, 48 so far are Peugeots.
I provide transport for the whole of the police in the West Midlands, and out of that there's about 700 cars. We so far have only gone up to about 100 diesels, of which 60% are Peugeots, primarily 309.
The size of the fleet currently is 750 cars, of which 80 of those cars are diesel engine cars. Around about 20% of the diesel cars are Peugeot diesels.
There is some 3,500 cars in the fleet, over 350 diesel and some 300 Peugeot in that content.
We have at present 500 cars in our two divisions of Tilbury Douglas, of which 35 are diesel, and about 10 of those are Peugeot diesels at present.
Between them, these 5 fleet managers are responsible for the acquisition and maintenance of over 6,000 vehicles. They represent a good cross-section of British fleet buyers. So we've asked them to tell us about their experiences with Peugeot diesel cars, about reliability and fuel economy, about the total cost of running diesels as opposed to petrol cars. But most important of all, what are the cars like to drive? How well equipped are they? Do they match up to the aspirations of the drivers who sit behind the wheel all day? Quite simply, has their diesel experience been a good experience? This is what they told us.
The advantages of diesel to us as an operator are definitely the economies of operating the vehicles when measured against whole life cost.
So the operational cost advantage was the primary factor. However, I do believe that diesel is much more environmentally friendly than petrol.
Durability, economy, out of the range of vehicles that we've picked, acceptability.
Low maintenance costs, reliability, better fuel economy.
Almost everything I use is high mileage and very short life, and if I can extend the life and provide the durability, I should be able to save quite a significant amount of money.
The only time you know when you're in a diesel is when you start it up. When you drive it along, they perform now extremely well. They're very quiet at high speed, and with the advent of the turbo, now the driver has nothing to worry about with regard to acceleration and performance.
I think Peugeots are the market leaders in diesel cars at the moment. We have experience of Peugeots over the last 3 years. Since the introduction of the turbo diesel Peugeot, that really is making our drivers seriously think about diesels rather than petrols.
We went to Peugeot primarily because they had really an established name, proven product, and they were the closest, most acceptable vehicle to the petrol vehicle.
The Peugeot diesel has been around a long time. It stands up by itself. It's recognised generally by the contract hire industry that it is an extremely good product.
I think that Peugeot at the moment offers one of the best value for money diesels.
The cars are well specified, they're physically appealing cars. What we wanted to do was to have our drivers choose diesel cars. We don't compel them to have diesel cars. So we wanted to give them the best possible car we could.
Financial arguments are, again, most of the manufacturers that produce the diesel engine equivalents now have almost eliminated the surcharge of the diesel. For many years, if you wanted the diesel, you had to do a huge mileage to recover the additional cost. Peugeot in particular, fairly early on, reduced the price of the diesel to much closer to the petrol.
The way we operate our diesel cars, the biggest advantage comes from a much higher residual value. Fuel consumption is much better, and therefore there is a significant cost saving in that area. Maintenance costs are lower.
We've certainly found it to be very cost effective.
The residual values on the turbo diesels particularly, although they start off slightly more expensive, second-hand values are such that the depreciation allowed for in the contract is fairly small, and therefore have a better second-hand value.
Nobody has chosen a diesel car and not liked it. Quite a few people have chosen the diesel car because they felt it was the thing they ought to do, and having got in the car, find the car to be a very pleasant car.
Over the past 10 years, we've had a user-chooser policy, and a number of people in various grades have chosen the Peugeot option in preference to other motor manufacturers.
I think the change is slow, but there is definitely a move to go with the diesel. The change in trim has, I think, assisted this enormously. A lot of the drivers are now requesting diesels because of a greater awareness, both in cost and environment.
Well, initially in many areas there was some traditional prejudice to the diesel car. I think when people have actually driven the car and found out that the car performs equally as well as the 1600 engine cars that they've been used to, they've got a better comfort level, a better specification level, all those prejudices have been overcome.
The easiest way of overcoming any resistance is to get the drivers to actually drive the cars. We found that since we've entered into a user-chooser policy with our fleet, the number of diesels chosen by driver choice has increased phenomenally over petrol.
They're very little resistance once they started driving them. Performance is good, very acceptable, virtually no change to drive in the petrol engines.
The philosophy of getting people into diesel cars was based on the fact that we wanted them to choose diesel cars. We don't push them into diesel cars. So we are able to offer them a much better specified diesel car than the petrol engine car they were able to have. And as a consequence of that, they have taken it very well, and diesel cars are currently sought after.
Now that we've got turbocharged on the 405, then I see no problem with any criticism a driver might have about the performance of a diesel engine unit. The specification here is extremely good. You've got everything that you expect to have on a car of this size and this sort of cost. You've got radio cassette and sunroof, which is accepted as a standard features. You've got central door locking and infrared control and door locking, which is very useful when it's pouring rain and you don't want to fumble for your keys. You've got powered steering, you've got ABS.
Peugeot diesel car is a nice, well-spec car, good performance car, pleasant to drive, something that our drivers would want to drive.
We have electric windows here and a sunroof, good instrumentation, comfortable car.
It's very well equipped for a car in this category. Electric windows all round, electric sunroof. There's a very responsive 1.9 litre engine, and even though it's not the turbo equipped version, it is very enjoyable to drive.
The 405 range have now got turbo fitted to many of their specifications, and this in itself gives tremendous thrust over 2,500 revs.
The turbo does improve performance, more in line with fuel-injected petrol cars or even multi-valve petrol cars. The number of drivers that have chosen the turbo version over the normally aspirated version is quite high.
I think that the diesel engine in the Peugeot is a particularly good one. It either matches or often outmatches that of the petrol equivalent.
So I think turbo-equipped diesel cars are as
good performance-wise as any petrol car.
Well, we haven't replaced any major component on any of the diesels. Clutch life's dramatically improved by a factor of 2 to 3.
So far our experience of diesel cars is one of very, very good reliability. Of course, they don't have the ignition-related electrical systems that cause trouble with petrol engine cars.
We expect to be getting significantly over the 100 to 120,000 miles out of the diesels, which everything seems to be on course. We've done around 100,000 on a number of them now with no failures, apart from clutch replacement between 60 and 80,000 miles. Petrols, we would only expect 20 to 30,000 miles out of a clutch. Really, there are very few disadvantages, providing you can actually get the performance out of the vehicle that is operationally acceptable.
I can't really think of a downside of this car at the moment.
At the moment, diesels carry a premium residual value because there aren't that many diesel second-hand cars around. As more and more people, as Peugeot particularly, get more and more cars on the road, there is a risk that the market will be saturated with diesels in years to come. But I don't believe it will seriously affect residual values.
Well, our plans for the future are to continue to have more and more Peugeot diesels on the fleet, and hopefully we shall have up to 95% of Peugeot diesels.
Currently, orders to date for 1992, orders that are placed and orders that have been fulfilled, are 60% plus diesels.
I'll be putting them in wherever they are operationally acceptable, which I would anticipate, provided I can get the diesel supply, would be probably 50% of the fleet.
Well, a year ago we introduced user chooser, so therefore the driver had a free choice of any car on the market, whether diesel or petrol, up to a certain rental. In that year we've seen the number of Peugeot diesels particularly increase significantly through natural choice of the driver. Now I expect that will continue. The more vehicles we get on the fleet, the more people see other people driving them. There will be a natural progression of people wishing to follow suit.
I see that the diesels will continue to grow ground almost infinitely. Double, treble, I don't see any limit to the number of diesels.
So in 3 years' time, what percentage do you think you'll have of diesel?
I would have thought that 50% would be a conservative estimate.
Well, the arguments in favour of diesel rather than petrol have never really been in doubt, though it's only in recent years that the economics have been seen to be so strongly on the side of diesel. But for many fleet managers, the overriding argument against remains the old traditional image of diesel. Well, now Peugeot have shown that the image can be very different. In terms of quality and specification, Peugeot diesels give nothing away to their petrol counterparts. From what we've heard today, it's clear they can win hearts and minds.
Well, I don't think you'll hear better evidence than that to support the case of diesel versus petrol. Those 5 fleet managers have obviously been able to make direct comparisons of whole life costs between a fleet of diesel cars and a fleet of petrol cars. If you were to do the same, what sort of economies could you reasonably expect to achieve?
The immediate benefit of a diesel engine, of course, is its unrivalled fuel economy. No petrol engine even comes close to matching the lower consumption that a diesel will return. Government fuel tests confirm this fact, but they do still tend to flatter the petrol engine somewhat. Certainly, if you were to test a petrol-powered car that was in peak condition and at its normal operating temperature, the margin of superiority enjoyed by the diesel would be around 20%, which is what government figures generally indicate.
But in reality, petrol engines tend to drift from their peak as the miles pile up after a service. Diesel engines don't drift from their peak state of tune. What's more, diesels don't need to warm up in the way the petrol engines do before retaining optimum economy. Realistic independent testing in the USA and in Europe, confirmed by the experience of many of our customers operating Peugeot diesels, clearly indicates that a much more significant margin of around 40% is nearer the mark.
Whilst comparing fuel economy, Let's remember that non-Cat petrol cars won't be available by the end of the year, so you'll have to take account of the Cat-equipped model prices when making cost comparisons for your management. Here's some evidence to support the fuel saving claim. Comparing petrol and diesel fuel consumption on an urban fuel cycle, according to government statistics, a 309 GLD returned 40.4 miles to the gallon, whereas the 309 GL 1.4 petrol equivalent with a catalytic converter, because that's all you'll be able to get by the end of this year, does around 35 miles per gallon. That's a saving with the diesel of some 16%. If we then look at some competitors' product, our diesel shows a 30% saving against the Astra LS14 catalyst, which returns 31 miles per gallon. Similarly, with the Escort 1.4 Cat at 28.2 miles per gallon, our diesel engine will show a massive 43% saving. And then against the Rover 414 SI Cat, a saving of some 26% against 32 miles per gallon.
Well, that's what happens in the light sector. Let's take a brief look at the medium sector. And here is pretty much the same story. On an urban cycle, our own 405 GLD, according to government statistics, returns a healthy 40.4 miles per gallon. Our petrol engine with a Cat in it returns 28.8 on the urban cycle, so a diesel engine shows a 40% saving. Against the Cavalier Cat, a pretty economical petrol engine at 31.7 miles per gallon, our diesel engine still shows nearly 30% saving. The Sapphire with the Cat in it, well, that will only achieve 27.7 miles per gallon, and our diesel engine on the urban cycle shows a 46% saving. And then finally, looking at the Rover 416, with just under 29 miles per gallon, our diesel engine again shows a 40% saving. So you can see the savings vary from around 20% to well over 40%.
So, which should we go for? Well, for the sake of argument, we could settle for a good old-fashioned British compromise 30%. But conservatively, we've used the government urban cycle statistics in our cost comparisons. We know that real-life savings are greater, and what our customers tell us certainly backs this up.
Imagine what would happen to your company's annual fuel bill if you just saved our compromise 30%. And as if such a saving wasn't in itself sufficiently attractive, there are several more cost benefits you can confidently count on. Higher residual values, for instance, lower maintenance and repair costs, and lower incidental costs such as insurance. You can add to this list a financial advantage that will certainly result from taking the opportunity, if you wished, to extend replacement cycles. The fact is, diesels do promise greater longevity, and if you do choose to take advantage of this extended replacement, well then your financial gain will be even more significant.
Of course, you don't have to extend your replacement cycle in order to make the diesel option pay. So in the comparisons we're going to talk about, the figures are based on a 3-year, 60,000 mile replacement policy. Let's take a look at residual values. Fleet operators, already enjoying the benefits of diesels, report consistently higher residuals for their diesels against their petrol models. In fact, a 4-year-old 80,000 mile diesel car will achieve a higher residual value than a 3-year-old 60,000 mile petrol model. Let's look at some exact figures, which are based, by the way, on April 1992 prices. And here we're using information from this publication called CAP Monitor. You've all heard of and probably seen the monthly CAP Black Book, which reflects used car values achieved at auctions in the preceding month. Well, twice a year, CAP produce this monitor, which forecasts residual values over varying mileages and periods. For example, they project that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, a 405 GL 1.6 with an April 92 list price of £11,500 will be worth £3,675. In other words, 32% of the full list price new. If we then compare that with our own 405 GL diesel costing just over £12,000, CAP project that in 3 years' time that'll be worth £5,400, an impressive 45% of the full list price new. And finally, our 405 GL diesel turbo with a list price of some £12,500, the residual value projection in 3 years' time is over £6,000, nearly 50% of the full list price new.
So that's how our diesels shape up against our petrol engines. But is our petrol engine competitive? Let's have a look. Remember, our 405 GL 1.6 has a list price of $11,500 and a residual value some 32% of the full list price new. How does the competition measure up? If we then compare that with a Cavalier 4-door 1.6, current list price is $11,700 and CAP forecast a residual value of $39.50, giving a percentage of nearly 34%. For the Sierra Sapphire, at 12,115, CAP project a residual value of 3,850, just under 32%, lower than our 405 GL16. And finally, looking at the ROVR 416 SI, current cost new, well, that's 11,889. The residual value projection, that's 37.50, only 31.5%, so you can see our 405 is very competitive against other petrol engine derivatives. Overlaying the diesel performance we highlighted earlier, you can see savings in excess of £2,000 on some models, 45% and 50% against the full list price new, whereas all the petrol models are languishing in the low 30s.
As if that wasn't enough, here are the residual values of our diesel models against those that CAP currently project for our competitors' diesels. And as you can see, not only do our Peugeot diesels outstrip petrol cars, but they also have a significant advantage over diesel models from our competitors. We've concentrated on the most popular sector of the fleet market, but if you look at smaller cars or at larger cars, the trend is still there, very much in evidence, very much to the considerable advantage of diesel cars.
Now let's look at servicing, repairs and maintenance. And here we can point to evidence collected by ADAC, the German equivalent of our AA. ADAC, with typically boring German efficiency, log all breakdowns they deal with, and their figures show that diesel breakdown rate is only half that of petrol. This is reckoned, very conservatively as we know, to be worth a saving of £300 over 60,000 miles.
Even though petrol vehicles have longer service intervals than diesels, this diesel on-cost of about £150 over 3 years is more than offset by the £300 saving on repairs and maintenance. We believe that given repair costs and consequential losses arising from loss of use, the real benefit is probably much higher. But we'll stick to the conservative figure of £150 net saving over the 3 years.
We also mentioned incidental costs, by their very nature difficult to quantify accurately. Nevertheless, fleet operators with considerable Peugeot diesel experience all tell us pretty much the same thing. Reduced insurance costs, reduced accident damage costs, reduced hire vehicle costs, and less downtime from greater reliability, which of course means less disruption to business appointments and so forth. Our financial analysis doesn't highlight any of these potential savings, but imagine what would happen if your entire fleet moved down an insurance group, as could be the case if you switched from petrol to diesel.
What we haven't considered yet is the cost of acquisition. You'd probably expect to pay more for a diesel than a petrol model. These days the price difference is hardly significant, especially when compared to catalyst-equipped cars.
Here are some April 92 prices, assuming a 15% discount off normal retail, which I've been told some fleet buyers are occasionally able to get. As we can see, the 405 GLD 1.9 comes in at £10,284 after the 15% discount, though this doesn't take account of any delivery charges. Our 1.6 engine with a cat, well, that's some £13 more expensive. Compared to the Cavalier, we have a difference of £66. To the Sierra, £86, and the ROVR would cost you a massive £218 more.
So, we've looked at fuel consumption, residuals, maintenance, and acquisition costs. What's the bottom line cost saving? For the purposes of this comparison, I'm assuming you're purchasing cars rather than contract hire or some other form of leasing arrangement. Though if you do contract hire, in the end you'll see similar savings. Here you can see what you'll save with a 405 GL diesel compared to 4 petrol power competitors over 3 years and 60,000 miles. Compared to the Cavalier, £66 on acquisition, £848 on fuel, £150 on maintenance, £1,450 on the residual value, giving a total of some £2,514. Compared to the Ford Sapphire, a total saving of some £3,200. The ROVR would cost you an extra £3,262, and you'd save just over £3,000 compared to our 405 petrol model.
To save some mental arithmetic, here are the bottom line savings to be reflected in your balance sheet if you ran 250 of these cars. £628,500 if you have 1.6 Cavaliers. £782,750 if you've got 4 or 5 petrol models. £800,500 if you're currently running 1.6 LX Sapphires. And £815,500 if you have ROVR 416 SIs. A fleet switching just 25 to 30 medium sector cars from petrol to diesel could therefore save, over 3 years, around £100,000. What these figures demonstrate is that diesel offers, indeed delivers, considerably lower cost of ownership.
Can you afford not to consider diesel more seriously? You know how many vehicles you're running? What might these savings be worth in total to your company? Imagine how many companies throughout the UK would love to add these amounts of cash to their bottom lines. How much more would they have to sell? How many more sales staff would they need? Could they even contemplate doing such a thing given the current trading climate? And then again, it might be a case of saving jobs.
But maybe you can make these savings. I've said our figures are conservative, and that's more than borne out by this article you may have seen in the Times on March the 23rd. As it says here, Hertz Leasing calculates that changing a fleet of Peugeot 405 1.6 GL petrol cars to 1.9 GL diesels would save a 10-car fleet £21,862 in 1 year, a 50-car fleet £109,312, and a 250-car fleet £546,560. That's more than double the savings we just gave you.
Well, there you have it. You've heard from us about the benefits diesel offers. And you've heard from 5 fleet managers who tell us they expect to have more and more Peugeot diesels in their fleet. If you'd like one of these diesel packs for more information, or better still a test drive to see for yourself the refinement and performance you get from Peugeot diesels, just call your Peugeot fleet manager or contact your local Peugeot dealer. They'll be happy to help.
There are many large companies who have already tried and have bought Peugeot diesels. Companies such as those we've heard from earlier on. They've been attracted by the financial arguments, won over by the quality of the product, and are deriving satisfaction from the knowledge that their cars are less harmful to the environment. During the 4 years up to 1990, 1 out of every 4 diesel cars sold in the UK was a Peugeot. And last year, our share climbed dramatically to over 30%. There are several examples of fleets going over to 100% Peugeot diesel, even the managing director's car. As we said earlier, can you honestly afford not to consider the diesel option? From Neil and me, goodbye.
Goodbye.